Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. They locked Leora Ashenfell in silver chains before the sun fully rose, when frost-bound ravine was still wrapped in blue-gray mist and silence felt heavy enough to choke on. The chains bit into her wrists and ankles instantly, burning like fire pressed beneath skin, sending sharp pain up her arms and spine. She stumbled forward as Calwyn Meyer shoved her, boots scraping rock, his grip rough and deliberate. The sound of metal echoed too loudly, announcing her shame to the gathered crowd. Faces watched, some cold, some fearful, some pretending not to see. Leora's breath shook, but she kept her head high. She refused to give them tears. Silver hummed against her bones, alive with cruel intent, designed to weaken and expose. Her cloak slipped from her shoulders, torn thin from nights of hiding, and the morning air cut into her skin. Somewhere above, a raven cried. The sound made her chest ache. She was being displayed, judged, stripped of dignity in front of people who once shared meals and laughter with her. The humiliation burned worse than the chains. She focused on standing, on not falling, on surviving the next breath. Silver-shard pit opened wide before her, a scar carved into stone where justice had never lived. Ancient runes circled the ground, carved by hands that feared what they could not control. Edris Howrow stood at the center, his posture stiff, staff resting against the earth as though drawing strength from it. His eyes swept over Leora without warmth. "Unbound," he declared, voice echoing through the ravine. "Unclaimed. A danger to order." The words landed heavy, final. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Leora felt them like stones thrown at her back. Unclaimed meant alone. It meant no one would step forward when the pain began. Her heart pounded, not from fear of death, but from the ache of betrayal. She had followed their rules. She had hidden. She had stayed silent. Still they chained her. Guards forced her to her knees. Silver flared brighter, sparks dancing as it tightened. Pain blurred her vision, but she swallowed her cry. Begging had never saved anyone like her. The wind carried the scent of pine and cold stone. Leora lifted her eyes to the pale sky and wondered how freedom could feel so close, yet unreachable. As the ritual preparations began, memory pushed in uninvited. Leora remembered night willow wilds, moonlight spilling through branches like liquid silver, laughter echoing softly between trees. She remembered a boy with storm-dark hair and careful eyes who taught her how to listen to the forest instead of fearing it. Valor Kanath. The thought of his name twisted her chest. He had warned her once that rules were weapons, not shields. She hadn't believed how sharp they could be. Silver tightened again, drawing her back into the present with a hiss of pain. Her muscles trembled as the earth beneath the pit responded, pulling at her like a tide. The runes glowed faintly. This place fed on fear. A child's quiet sob drifted from the crowd, quickly silenced. Leora clenched her jaw. She would not let them see her break. If this was the end, she would face it standing. She rolled her shoulders despite the pain, grounding herself, listening past the noise. Beneath the fear, beneath the chanting, she sensed something else. Movement, distant but purposeful. Her pulse stuttered. Hope was dangerous, but it stirred anyway. Time dragged until the sky deepened and shadows stretched long across the pit. When the council signaled the test, silence fell sharp and sudden. Edris raised his staff, and the runes blazed bright white. The chains constricted violently, pain-tearing. Through Leora like lightning. She cried out, unable to stop it. The sound ripped raw from her throat. Silver screamed, metal vibrating as if alive. Her vision fractured, spots of light dancing as her strength faltered. She felt herself falling forward, breath breaking, dignity slipping away. And then the ground shook. A roar tore through Frostbound Ravine, powerful and furious, shaking loose stones from the cliff walls. The crowd erupted into chaos. Hunters shouted. Rifles clattered to the ground. From the tree line, a massive shadow burst forth, moving with impossible speed. Golden eyes blazed through dusk. The wolf hit the pit like a storm given flesh, jaws snapping at the chains. Silver shrieked as links snapped, one after another, rules breaking with them. Leora felt the weight vanish. She collapsed, caught by strong arms. Valor knelt beside her, breath ragged, eyes burning with fear and resolve as his wolf paced protectively, hackles raised. "I'm here," he said, voice low and shaking, as if afraid she might vanish if he spoke too loudly. Leora stared at him, stunned, the pain still ringing through her body. The crowd backed away as thunder rolled overhead, rain beginning to fall in heavy drops. Edris shouted orders, but no one moved fast enough. Valor stood, positioning himself between Leora and the council, one hand steady on her shoulder, grounding her. His wolf snarled, daring anyone to try. Leora felt something shift deep inside her, a breaking and a binding all at once. They had locked her in silver chains, believing her alone. They were wrong. As rain soaked the pit and the sky cracked open, Leora understood this moment would change everything. Freedom had a cost. Love had teeth, and the world would never cage her quietly again. Rain turned Frostbound Ravine into a mirror of chaos, water streaking stone and washing blood from broken silver links. Leora lay pressed against Valor's chest, the steady thud of his heart anchoring her as her limbs shook from shock and pain. His cloak wrapped around her shoulders, warm, smelling of rain and forest. Around them, guards hesitated, unsure whether to obey, shouted orders, or flee the wolf pacing the pit's edge. Valor's jaw was tight, eyes never leaving the crowd. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He simply stayed. That steadiness cracked something open inside Leora. She had survived alone for so long that being protected felt unreal, almost dangerous. When Edris Halro demanded Valor stand down, Valor answered with silence, his wolf's low growl carrying more authority than any staff. The council retreated, pride bruised but fear louder. Leora felt the ground ease its pull as the runes dimmed. For the first time since dawn, she could breathe without silver burning her lungs. Valor helped her stand. Her legs trembled, but she stayed upright. Survival demanded movement. Staying meant chains. They fled as night thickened, slipping into the maze of ravines while thunder masked their passage. Valor moved with purpose, guiding Leora along narrow paths only wolves trusted. She focused on each step, on the feel of damp moss beneath her boots, on not collapsing. When her strength failed, Valor lifted her without comment, carrying her through rain and darkness as if she weighed nothing. Embarrassment flared, then faded beneath exhaustion. By the time they reached the tree line, Frostbound Ravine was only a memory of pain and fire. They did not stop until the forest swallowed sound and scent alike. In a hollow, shielded by ancient roots, Valor set her down and knelt to examine her wrists. The burns were angry, red and blistered. His hands shook as he cleaned them with water from his canteen. "I should have come sooner," he said quietly. Leora watched his face, saw guilt carved deep. "You came," she answered. It mattered. Outside, rain softened to a whisper, as if the world was listening. They rested until dawn bled gray through the canopy. Valor kept watch while Leora drifted between sleep and waking, dreams tangled with memory. She remembered her mother, Saren Ashenfell, warning her that being unbound meant living between worlds. Leora had chosen freedom anyway. When she woke fully, Valor offered food, simple and warm. She ate slowly, strength returning with each bite. Questions pressed at her, sharp and many, but she chose one. "Why now?" she asked. Valor stared into the fire, then met her gaze. "Because they crossed a line they cannot uncross." He told her of the council's quiet plans, of Calwyn-Meyer's hunts growing bolder, of whispers meant to flush her out. He had stayed away to protect her. The truth hurt, but it made sense. Protection often looked like absence. Leora nodded, accepting pain with clarity. She would not waste what he risked. Outside the hollow, birds began to sing, cautious and bright. They traveled toward night willow wilds, where old laws bent instead of breaking. Along the way, Leora learned to move again, to trust her body despite Silver's memory. Vylor taught her how to mask her scent, how to read wind and shadow. In return, she told him about the pit, about the moment hope almost killed her. He listened without interruption, anger simmering beneath restraint. When they reached the wilds, the forest welcomed them with open quiet, leaves sighing relief. But safety was not certainty. The council would not forgive humiliation. Hunters would follow. As they made camp beneath a crescent moon, Leora felt a shift inside her, subtle but undeniable. Something had answered in the pit when Valor's wolf broke the chains. Unclaimed, no longer fit. She did not know what she was becoming, only that the world had changed its shape around her. Vylor sensed it too, eyes searching her face. "We'll face it together," he said. Leora believed him. Belief felt like a risk worth taking. Morning brought tracks near their camp, fresh, human, careless. Calwyn-Meyer was close. Vylor stiffened, wolf surfacing with a warning growl. Leora's pulse quickened, but fear did not rule her. She rose, testing her balance, feeling strength settle where pain had been. "They won't chain me again," she said, voice steady. Vylor studied her, then nodded, pride and worry warring in his eyes. Together, they erased their traces and moved deeper into the wilds, choosing confrontation over flight. Leora felt the forest align with her steps, roots yielding, paths opening. Whatever the council had tried to make her, she was more. As the sun climbed, light speared through leaves, and Leora smiled despite the danger ahead. Survival was no longer enough. She wanted justice. She wanted truth, and she would not be hunted quietly anymore. Night willow wilds breathed around them like a living cathedral, leaves lifting and settling as dawn warmed the roots beneath Leora's boots. Vylor moved ahead, quiet and deliberate, reading signs she barely saw, while his wolf lingered at the edge of her senses, watchful and restless. They followed a creek veined with frost, its water whispering warnings that bent with the wind. Leora focused on matching his pace, rebuilding trust in muscles that still remembered Silver's bite. Each step felt earned. When they stopped, Vylor crouched, brushing fingers through mud, then pointed to a broken fern. Hunters, two at least, careless and close. Leora's pulse steadied instead of spiking. Fear had sharpened her. Pain had taught her patience. She knelt, mirroring his movements, and the forest seemed to lean closer, listening. A distant crow called once, then twice. Vylor met her eyes and nodded. They would not run. The choice settled between them, heavy and clear, like a blade finally drawn. Somewhere deeper, water struck stone, time marking itself, and Leora felt the wilds accept her presence without demand, offering shelter, danger, and truth in equal measure, a promise that survival here required courage, honesty, and relentless forward motion together now. They reached an abandoned watch hut by midday, its roof sagging, walls threaded with ivy and old warnings carved by desperate hands. Vylor searched the perimeter while Leora rested, palms pressed to sun-warmed wood, grounding herself. The hut smelled of dust, resin, and forgotten fear. Inside she found a charm tied with twine, wolf bone polished smooth, humming faintly when she touched it. The hum answered something in her chest. Vylor returned, expression grim. Calwyn-Meyer was closer than tracks suggested. Scouts had split to corner them. Leora closed her fingers around the charm and felt steadier. She remembered Saren's stories about objects choosing people when moments mattered. "We can bait them," Leora said, surprising herself. Vylor studied her, measuring resolve against risk, then agreed. They set a path leading east, loud and obvious, while slipping west through ferns and shadow. When shouts rose behind them, Leora did not flinch. She breathed, listened, and moved like the forest had always been waiting for her to learn its language. Branches brushed her shoulders approvingly. Insects fell silent, and even the light shifted, guiding her steps with quiet insistence, as if choice itself had weight here and consequence followed swiftly without mercy today. The trap worked briefly, then snapped back. Calwyn's voice cut through the trees, oily and confident, promising safety with one hand and punishment with the other. Leora felt anger rise, hot and clean. She stepped from cover, showing herself, charm visible at her throat. Vylor tensed but trusted her. Calwyn smiled when he saw her unchained, smile thinning when the forest closed ranks. Hunters emerged, weapons ready, yet hesitant. Leora spoke plainly, naming the council's lies, naming the broken law in Silvershard Pit. Her words carried, steadied by the wilds. When Calwyn lunged, Vylor intercepted, a blur of motion and muscle. Steel rang. The wolf surged, forcing distance. Leora did not freeze. She moved to flank, heart hammering, senses sharp. She felt a pull, not silver, but something older, aligning breath and bone. With a shout, she struck Calwyn's wrist, knocking his weapon away. The forest erupted, birds lifting, branches cracking. In the chaos, Calwyn fled, pride bleeding behind him. Vylor grabbed Leora's hand, grounding her again, eyes wide with fierce relief, while the hunters hesitated, suddenly unsure who held authority when the land itself seemed to answer her call with ancient power awakening now beneath their feet. Today, swiftly, they did not linger. Vylor urged speed, guiding them through ridges where fog pooled and sound died. By dusk, they reached a stone outcrop overlooking night willow wilds, safe for a moment. Leora collapsed, laughter bubbling out, half hysteria, half joy. Vylor joined her, breathless, and for a heartbeat the world felt gentle. He traced the burns on her wrists with reverence, promising never again. Leora believed him, yet truth pressed harder. The pull she felt earlier returned, stronger now, tugging her toward the forest's heart. She admitted it aloud. Vylor listened, fear flickering, then acceptance. Wolves changed. So did those who loved them. As stars kindled, the charm warmed against Leora's skin, thrumming in time with her pulse. She sensed lines connecting her to roots, rivers, and paths unseen. This was not a gift without cost. She would be seen, she would be hunted, but she would not be powerless. Vylor kissed her brow, sealing a vow spoken without words. Below them, night willow breathed approval, leaves sighing, animals settling, as if acknowledging a pact renewed, one forged by choice rather than fear, and guarded by love willing to stand exposed against coming storms together, now without retreat or regret ever. Sleep came fitfully. At dawn, Perrin Locke arrived, hands empty, eyes tired. He brought warnings and a map, confessing doubt at last. The council would move openly now, summoning forces to Blackspire Keep. Leora studied the map and felt the pull align, pointing there. This was not coincidence. She chose her path. Vylor supported her choice, though worry lined his face. They would confront the council, expose truth, and end the hunts. As they set out, Leora felt stronger than fear, steadier than pain. The wilds did not cling. They released her with purpose. She carried its mark invisibly, a promise and a burden. When the towers of Blackspire appeared through haze, Leora squeezed Vylor's hand. Whatever waited beyond those walls would not define her. She would. And this time, the chains would break before they ever closed. Somewhere far behind, Calwyn nursed wounds and hatred, while ahead justice gathered breath, and Leora walked forward knowing the story had turned. Momentum shifting, destiny bending under her deliberate steps. She did not look back, trusting the path, the wolf beside her, and the strength awakened within, ready for confrontation, truth, and the cost of becoming fully at last, now together, always. Blackspire Keep rose from the moor like a wound that refused to heal, its dark towers cutting into a sky the color of old ash. Leora felt the pull sharpen as they approached, a steady insistence beneath her ribs guiding each step. Vylor walked beside her, silent now, shoulders squared, eyes tracking the walls, the gates, the narrow windows where watchers hid. The road was empty, too empty, as if the land itself held its breath. Wind dragged across the grass, whispering warnings that tangled with memory. Leora remembered being told safety lived behind walls like these. She knew better now. When they reached the outer stones, Perrinlock's map proved true. Guards were stationed wide, confident in numbers. Leora slowed, grounding herself, letting the wild's rhythm steady her pulse. The charm at her throat warmed, not burning, but bright with recognition. Vylor brushed her hand once, a quiet question. She nodded. Fear was present, yes, but it no longer ruled. She stepped forward openly, chin lifted, choosing visibility over shadow. The first guard raised a hand, startled. Leora met his eyes and spoke her name. It carried farther than she expected, echoing off stone, turning heads, bending attention toward a truth long denied, calling consequences awake at last. They were taken inside without chains, confusion winning over cruelty. The hall swallowed sound, banners hanging heavy with dust and old victories. Council members gathered on the dais, faces hardening as recognition spread. Osmond Veilcrest sat at the center, fingers steepled, assessing cost and opportunity in a single glance. Cowan Mayer stood near the wall, arm bandaged, hatred thinly masked by a smile that never reached his eyes. Leora felt heat rise, but kept her voice steady. She told them of Silver Shard Pit, of broken law, of silver turned from restraint into spectacle. Vylor spoke too, measured and calm, naming orders, whispered in corridors, hunts sanctioned without record. Murmurs grew, doubt flickered. Edris Halrow entered late, staff tapping stone like punctuation. He denied nothing, framed cruelty as necessity. Leora listened, then held up the charm. The hall shifted. Old symbols carved into the dais answered, glowing faintly. "You fear what you cannot own," she said. "You call it order." The word rang hollow. Outside, thunder rolled, a reminder that storms obey no counsel. Osmond's gaze sharpened. He sensed momentum turning, and power never yielded without testing its edge. The test came swiftly. Guards closed ranks. Osmond raised a hand, feigning calm. "Prove it," he said. "Show us what answers you." Leora's heart hammered. This was the cost. She stepped onto the sigil etched before the dais and closed her eyes. She breathed in stone and rain, breathed out fear. The pull surged, aligning breath and bone. Light bled from the carvings, threading through her like a current. She did not summon. She listened. The hall trembled as the wild's echo filled the space. Wind through leaves, water over rock, the steady presence of something vast and patient. Gasps rippled. Calvin lunged, blade flashing, panic driving him. Vylor moved, intercepting, wolf surfacing with a snarl that froze the room. Leora opened her eyes and met Calvin's fury with stillness. The charm pulsed once. Calvin's blade skittered away, metal ringing against stone. Silence fell, thick and undeniable. Osmond stood slowly, face pale. Power had answered, not as spectacle, but as balance. Leora felt drained yet whole. She had crossed a threshold and would not step back. Judgment fractured the hall. Some counselors argued, others bowed their heads. Edris Halrow's authority crumbled under scrutiny he could not deflect. Perrinlock stepped forward, testimony steady, naming orders and dates. Isolde Fenn emerged from the shadows with records long hidden, her quiet courage tilting the scale. Osmond weighed the room and chose survival. He stripped Edris of command, ordered Calwyn detained, promised reforms spoken too smoothly. Leora listened and felt no triumph, only resolve. Promises required witnesses. She demanded open records, an end to silver trials, sanctuary for the unbound. Vylor added his voice, clear and unyielding, The hall agreed, reluctantly, publicly. Outside, rain broke the sky, cleansing and cold. When they left Blackspire Keep, guards parted, eyes uncertain but respectful. Leora's legs trembled, exhaustion catching up, yet her spine held. The pull eased, settling into a quiet hum, like a path laid beneath her feet. Valor squeezed her hand, pride and worry mingling. Victory had a shape, and it was unfinished. They had won space to breathe. They had not won peace. Night found them beyond the moor, camped beneath a sky rinsed clean. Leora stared into the fire, turning the charm over in her palm, feeling its weight change. Valor watched her, waiting. "They'll test the promises," she said softly. "Power always does." He nodded. The wolf paced the perimeter, satisfied but alert. Leora felt the wilds release another breath, approval tempered with warning. She had spoken truth in stone halls and lived. Tomorrow would demand more. She leaned into Valor's shoulder, allowing rest without surrender. For the first time since the chains, she felt neither hunted nor hidden. She was visible by choice. The fire crackled. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled, answered by another. Leora closed her eyes, committing the sound to memory. Whatever came next would not erase this moment. She would carry it forward into storms and settlements alike, until justice learned to last. Morning after Blackspire felt unreal, as if the world had tilted and not yet settled. Leora woke to mists. Curling between trees, fire reduced to embers. Valor, already awake, sharpening a blade with quiet focus. News traveled fast. Writers would be spreading altered decrees even now, twisting truth into comfort. Leora sat up slowly, joints aching, and listened to the forest pulse. The pull was softer, no longer urgent, but present, like a compass humming beneath skin. She feared what came next, more than the council's anger. Responsibility. People would come. The unbound always did, drawn by rumor and need. Valor met her gaze and seemed to read the thought. He nodded once. They would not run. They would build something steadier than flight. By noon the first arrived, a woman with iron-gray hair and a child clinging to her coat, eyes wary, wrists scarred faintly. Leora knelt to the child's height, spoke gently, and felt the wild's open space around them. Sanctuary was not walls, it was witness. Word spread with footsteps, and with it, danger. Choices would harden hearts and test mercy, yet Leora accepted the weight, breathing through fear, choosing presence over retreat despite gathering shadows ahead. Now. They moved camp closer to Night Willow's inner paths, selecting ground where roots intertwine like fingers. Leora helped the newcomers settle, assigning watches, sharing food, listening more than speaking. Stories surfaced in fragments. Hunts at dawn, silver taxes, children hidden in cellars. Each story etched resolve deeper. Valor trained those willing, teaching silence and signaling, insisting restraint before force. By afternoon, Perrin Locke returned with news. Factions within the council resisted reform. Calwyn's allies whispering revenge. Leora gathered everyone and spoke plainly. There would be no army, no banners. Sanctuary meant refusal to mirror cruelty. If attacked, they would protect and disperse. Never cornered. Some doubted. Most stayed. As dusk fell, Isolde arrived with ledgers and maps, evidence meant for public release. Leora felt the pull stir again, aligning choice with consequence. She agreed to carry the truth beyond the wilds to Ashmere Crossing and the border towns. Visibility would be shield and blade. Valor volunteered to accompany her, Wolf restless at the thought of roads. Together they planned routes and signals. When night settled, Leora stood alone briefly, palms to earth, asking not for power, but clarity. She felt heard by soil and stars alike, holding steady against doubt within. Ashmere Crossing greeted them with smoke and noise, a hard-edged place where rumors traded faster than goods. Leora stood on a crate in the square and told the story cleanly, naming names, showing marks, opening Isolde's ledgers for all to see. Some scoffed, others wept. The sheriff hesitated, then ordered copies made. By evening, writers carried truth outward, uneven but unstoppable. Trouble followed quickly. A knife flashed in an alley. Valor disarmed without breaking bones. A brick shattered near Leora's feet. She did not flinch. The pull steadied her, lending calm, not command. She learned then its nature. Not control, but consent. People chose to listen. When Calvin's sympathizers tried to incite a brawl, the crowd refused. Fear lost momentum. That night, Leora spoke with parents and traders, promising nothing except honesty. It was enough to start. At the inn, Valor confessed his fear of losing her to purpose. She took his hands and told him truth did not replace love. It required it. Outside, lanterns swayed, and the town breathed easier, sensing a future shaped by courage rather than chains. Morning would test promises, but tonight held. Hope settled quietly between strangers, without demanding proof yet, or allegiance sworn. The council responded at dawn with proclamations and patrols, but Ashmere resisted politely, legally, loudly. Leora traveled on, town to town, repeating the truth until repetition forged credibility. Each stop added allies and risk. In Cinderford Reach, hunters blocked the road. Valor shifted halfway, eyes gold, presence enough to halt them. Leora stepped forward and invoked the decrees publicly posted, forcing a retreat that tasted like vinegar. The pull guided her words, not louder, clearer. She learned to rest between stops, to eat, to laugh when laughter came. At night, she and Valor argued and reconciled, fear rubbing raw against devotion. He worried the pull would claim her. She worried his wolf would be blamed for her choices. They promised honesty and kept it. When letters arrived from Night Willow, reports of safety holding, Leora allowed herself relief. But shadows lengthened. Osmond's patience thinned. A summons arrived, sealed and formal, demanding her presence to finalize reforms. The timing felt wrong. Leora weighed it, then chose to go, refusing secrecy. If there was a trap, it would be seen. She invited witnesses, shared routes openly, and prepared contingencies, trusting light more than locked doors. Valor agreed, standing beside her, always ready for consequence together. The road back to Blackspire felt narrower, watched. Leora sensed the pull tighten, warning rather than urging. Valor's wolf paced within, restrained but coiled. At the keep, gates opened with ceremony masking tension. Inside, Osmond received them with practiced courtesy and sharper eyes. Papers lay ready. Signatures would bind promises into law. Leora read every line, found omissions like teeth marks. She refused to sign without amendments, naming protections and penalties. The room chilled. Osmond smiled thinly. Pressure mounted. Veiled threats. Talk of order. Leora stood firm, voice steady. The pull answered. A quiet alignment that made lies itch. Witnesses murmured assent. At last, Osmond conceded, ink flowing reluctantly. Relief did not follow. As they departed, Calvin escaped custody in the confusion, blood marking his path. Valor swore softly. Leora closed her eyes, feeling the road bend ahead. This was not an ending. It was escalation. Yet she felt no regret. She had chosen visibility and survived. As rain began again, gentle. This time, Leora stepped into it willingly, trusting that whatever storm followed, she would meet it unchained, with love at her side. Night gathered softly, and resolve settled deeper than fear within her steady heart, ready for trials ahead. The rain followed them from Blackspire like a warning that refused to fade, turning the road slick and the air heavy with iron. Leora felt it before she saw it. The tightening pull beneath her ribs, no longer gentle, no longer guiding, but braced, as if the land itself had drawn a breath and held it. Valor rode close, silent, eyes scanning hedges and stone markers, his wolf restless under skin. They did not speak of Calvin's escape, but his absence pressed louder than thunder. By the time dusk fell, they reached an abandoned way station, its roof half collapsed, walls scarred by old fires. Leora insisted they stop. Fatigue dulled instincts, and mistakes grew teeth at night. Inside, she traced sigils in ash, not spells, but markers of intent, asking the ground to witness rather than obey. Valor set watches, trusting sound and scent. As they ate, distant howls stitched the dark, not wolves, but men signaling. Leora's pulse steadied instead of racing. Fear had taught her its limits. She closed her eyes and listened deeper, sensing movement circling wide, patient. This was no ambush. It was a message. Calvin was hunting her openly now, and the road ahead would answer with blood or truth. She prepared for both without flinching. At dawn, the attack came swift and clean. Smoke first, choking and disorienting, then steel flashing through gray. Valor moved like a shadow, intercepting blows, forcing distance, never overcommitting. Leora stayed mobile, voice cutting through chaos, directing their companions to split and scatter as planned. The pull aligned her choices, not commanding outcomes, but clarifying angles and timing. She disarmed one attacker with a strike to the elbow, redirected another into wet stone, kept moving. When Calvin appeared, grin sharp as broken glass, hatred polished bright, Leora felt a cold calm settle. He taunted her with names, with threats against Night Willow, against the children who trusted her. Valor snarled, wolf surging. Leora lifted a hand. "Not like this," she said steady. Calvin lunged anyway. The fight was brutal and brief. Valor pinned him, blade at throat, breath ragged. Leora stepped close, meeting Calvin's eyes. "You lost when you chose fear," she said. He spat blood and laughed. She signaled Valor back. Mercy was not weakness, but consequence mattered. They bound Calvin without silver, choosing restraint over spectacle, and left him for authorities with witnesses present. The message traveled faster than smoke. This hunt would not be hidden. Afterward, the cost surfaced. A companion lay wounded, blood dark against mud. Leora knelt, hands shaking as she pressed cloth and breathed through panic. The pull steadied her enough to act, not to heal by magic, but to choose right pressure, right timing. The man lived. Relief broke through her composure in a quiet sob she did not hide. Valor wrapped her close, murmuring her name like an anchor. They buried the way station's ashes and moved on, carrying truth and scars alike. News met them on the road. Ashmere had held. Night Willow stood firm, but whispers spoke of a deeper rot. Contracts, silver shipments, secret courts beyond council reach. Osmund's reforms were already being bent. Leora felt anger burn clean and bright. She would not chase every shadow. She would strike the root. That night, by firelight, she told Valor her decision to convene a gathering beyond council walls, calling elders, traders, unbound, and wolves together. A covenant, not a crown. He worried it painted a target. She smiled sadly. Targets exist whether we stand still or not. He nodded, accepting the truth. The wolf settled, approving clarity over fear. They chose the place carefully, a natural amphitheater where river met stone, neutral ground older than borders. Messages went out with runners and riders, invitations open and plain. As days passed, people arrived cautiously, then confidently. Leora spoke last. After listening long, she named principles instead of rules: witness, consent, restraint, repair. She named penalties, too, for cruelty and secrecy. The pole thrummed softly, not amplifying her voice, but keeping it true. Debate flared, cooled, flared again. Agreements formed unevenly, but formed. When dissent rose sharp, Leora welcomed it, refusing purity tests. Valor stood at her side, presence steady. Wolves ringed the clearing at dusk, not threatening, simply present. Something shifted then, subtle and profound. The land accepted the gathering as legitimate. Wind stilled, water smoothed. People noticed. Power, it turned out, could be shared without dilution. As night deepened, signatures marked parchment, but the real binding happened in breath and gaze. Leora, felt exhausted and alive. This was not an ending. It was infrastructure for hope. The morning after, consequences arrived. Riders from Blackspire bearing warrants, faces tight. Leora met them openly, covenant in hand. Witnesses gathered. The warrants faltered under scrutiny. Authority cracked under daylight. Osmond's name carried less weight now. Frustration flashed, then calculation. The riders withdrew, promising return. Leora watched them go, feeling the pull ease again, like a bow unstrung between shots. Valor touched her shoulder. "You're changing the map," he said quietly. She smiled. "So are you." They walked the riverbank together, talking of rest and future, of what a life without running might look like. Leora admitted fear of losing herself to expectation. Valor admitted fear of losing her to purpose. They promised course corrections and tenderness. As they returned to the camp, a child ran up, offering a wildflower. Leora accepted it with a laugh that surprised her. The day warmed. For the first time, the road ahead felt wide instead of watched. Calvin would answer for his crimes. Osmond would adapt or fall. And Leora, unchained, would keep choosing clarity over fear, love over isolation, until justice learned to last. The Covenant's aftershock rippled outward faster than Leora expected, stirring hope and hostility in equal measure. Camps formed along the riverbanks, temporary and tense, filled with people testing what trust felt like without chains. Leora moved among them at dawn, listening to fear spoken softly, and anger sharpened overnight. The pull beneath her ribs had changed again, less a compass, more a balance, nudging her toward pauses instead of pushes. She learned when to stop talking. Valor noticed the shift first, adjusting his watch patterns, pulling her aside when exhaustion dulled her voice. "You don't have to carry every stone," he told her. She believed him, but stones still found her hands. By midday, messengers arrived with news that Blackspire Keep had closed its gates. Osmond Veilcrest had convened an emergency council, framing the Covenant as rebellion. The word spread like smoke, alarming traitors and emboldening hardliners. Leora gathered the elders and spoke plainly. "If they name us enemies, we answer as neighbors," she said. "No marches, no sieges." Some protested. Fear demanded action. Leora felt it too, the itch to force resolution. She resisted, trusting patience as strategy. The river ran steady beside them, indifferent to titles, reminding her that time could be an ally if respected. By evening, the first fracture appeared within the Covenant itself. A group of hunters demanded silver oversight, claiming wolves could not be trusted without it. Murmurs rose, old wounds reopened. Leora listened, then invited a wolf forward, not Valor, but an elder with scarred ears and tired eyes. He spoke of restraint learned through loss, of children he guarded from both sides. The tension softened, not erased. Compromise emerged. Silver would be regulated publicly, never used for punishment, only last defense, audited by mixed councils. It was imperfect. It was enough to move forward. Leora felt the pull steady, approving restraint over purity. Later, alone with Valor, she confessed doubt. "What if I'm wrong?" she asked. He answered without pause. "Then we adjust." Love sounded like logistics when survival was real. Night brought another test. A fire flared at the camp's edge, deliberate and contained. No injuries, just a message. Leora stood watching flames die, choosing not to chase shadows. Panic was the goal. She denied it. The forest breathed around them, waiting to see which lesson she would choose. The next morning, Perrin Locke arrived, bruised and urgent. He carried proof of a secret court convening beneath Blackspire. Judges appointed without record, sentences enforced by hired blades. Calvin's name appeared as an asset, not a prisoner. Leora felt heat rise sharper than before. This was the root she had sensed. She gathered a small delegation, traitors, elders, unbound, witnesses who could not be dismissed as radicals. Valor insisted on joining. Wolf coiled and ready. The plan was visibility, not force. Arrive during the secret court session. Expose proceedings under daylight and numbers. Risk coiled tight, but clarity demanded action. They traveled fast, avoiding main roads, hearts thudding in shared rhythm. At the keep's undercroft, torches guttered against damp stone. Voices echoed, sentences pronounced, lives weighed cheaply. Leora stepped into the threshold and spoke, voice carrying clean and loud. "Open court," she said. "Open names." Chaos followed. Judges faltered, blades half-drawn hesitated as witnesses surged forward. Recording, shouting. Vylor blocked a strike meant for Leora, pain flashing across his shoulder. Rage surged, then steadied. Leora did not shout. She named laws, dates, witnesses, forcing attention to truth. Guards withdrew under scrutiny. The court collapsed into daylight like a roach exposed. Afterward, consequences fell unevenly. Some judges fled. Others were detained publicly. Osmund Valcrest arrived too late, authority frayed by exposure. He attempted damage control, offering Leora a formal role. The pull tightened warningly. She declined, proposing instead an oversight council drawn from the Covenant and towns alike. Power shared, terms limited. Osmond agreed with thin grace, cornered by optics. Valor's wound was cleaned and bound. He laughed it off, but Leora's hands shook as she worked. "I won't lose you," she whispered. He kissed her knuckles. "Then don't," he replied simply. That night, the Covenant celebrated quietly, wary of triumph. Leora withdrew to the river, letting cold water numb her thoughts. She felt changed, harder in places, gentler in others. Leadership was not a crown. It was friction. She accepted the cost without romance. The pull eased again, as if acknowledging a step taken without vanity. Days later, Calvin Muir was captured by traitors near the border, recognized and restrained without spectacle. Leora attended the hearing as witness, not judge. She spoke of harm and accountability, refused execution, demanded restitution and exile enforced by treaty. The sentence stood. Calvin's hatred burned, but it had nowhere to land. As he was led away, Leora felt no satisfaction, only closure shaped like relief. The Covenant stabilized, agreements codified, patrols mixed. Valor recovered quickly, Wolf proud. They took a rare day of rest, walking beneath birch and cloud, talking of ordinary things. Leora admitted fear of becoming a symbol. Valor admitted fear of losing ordinary joys. They promised space for both. As dusk fell, a messenger arrived with news. Border towns requested guidance, not command. Leora smiled, weary and sincere. Guidance she could give, command she would refuse. She watched the sun sink, feeling the land settle around the choices made. The story was still moving, but its direction felt true. Unchained did not mean unmoored. It meant choosing anchors wisely and standing when storms tested them. The weeks after Calvin's exile were quieter, but the quiet felt stretched thin, like ice over deep water. Leora sensed it in the way conversations paused when she approached, in how people weighed her words more carefully than before. Symbols formed whether she wanted them or not. She walked the camps at dawn, grounding herself in ordinary needs, mending nets, sharing bread, listening to complaints about weather and sleep. The pull beneath her ribs remained steady but alert, reminding her that calm was not the same as safety. Valor stayed close without hovering, learning the rhythms of leadership alongside her, guarding space rather than claiming it. News arrived daily. Some councils complied willingly, others delayed, hoping momentum would fade. Leora knew better. Change always provoked a second strike, sharper than the first. When Isolde Fen brought word of silver caravans rerouted through hidden passes, guarded by mercenaries loyal to no town, Leora felt the warning tighten. Someone was stockpiling fear. She gathered a small group and debated response late into the night. Direct confrontation risked blood, delay risked disaster. At last, she chose interception with witnesses, trade routes exposed, contracts challenged publicly. Vilor supported the plan, though worry etched his brow. They would walk into uncertainty again, not as fugitives, but as proof that daylight could still matter. They intercepted the first caravan near a ravine, where roads narrowed and echoes betrayed lies. Leora stepped forward openly, calling for papers and names. The mercenaries laughed until townsfolk emerged behind her. Clerks, traders, elders, holding seals and records. The laughter died. The confrontation stayed tense, but bloodless, contracts voided under scrutiny. When a blade flashed, Valor's wolf surged just enough to remind everyone of consequence. The caravan turned back, silver untouched. Word spread quickly, and with it, anger. That night, fires burned on distant hills, signals, not celebrations. Leora felt exhaustion bite deeper. She confided to Valor her fear of becoming brittle, of losing softness under constant strain. He listened, then took her hand and led her away from camp to a quiet bend in the river. They spoke of beginnings, of stolen apples and moonlit paths, of laughter before rules sharpened. The pull softened, approving rest as strategy. They returned steadier. By morning, another message arrived. Blackspire requested negotiations to formalize oversight. The timing felt forced. Leora weighed it carefully and chose conditional attendance, insisting on neutral ground and open records. If there was a trap, it would snap in public. The negotiation hall was a converted granary in Ashmere, doors flung wide, windows unshuttered. Leora arrived with witnesses and left space for dissent. Osmond Velcrest spoke of stability and trade, of unity shaped by law. Leora answered with specifics, audits, limits, consequences. The exchange was measured until an explosion shattered glass. Panic surged as smoke rolled in. Someone screamed. Vilor pulled Leora low as debris rained. The pull screamed warning. Mercenaries poured through side doors, blades out, chaos deliberate. Leora's mind sharpened. "Out the north!" she shouted, directing flow, preventing crush. Valor and wolves formed moving cover, not attacking unless forced. Leora grabbed a ledger and dragged it clear, proof over pride. In the scramble, she spotted Osmond being hustled away by his own guards, face pale. Betrayal clarified itself. The attack failed to achieve slaughter. Witnesses escaped, evidence intact. Outside, townsfolk rallied, blocking exits, forcing mercenaries to flee. Sirens rang. Ashmere held. Leora stood shaking, smoke-stung eyes burning, but alive. This was the second strike she'd expected. It had missed its mark. Aftermath came with accusations and denials. Osmond disavowed the attack too quickly. Leora did not argue. She released records instead, payments traced, orders timed, routes named. Public outrage followed, messy and loud. Councils fractured. Oversight expanded under pressure. Valor tended wounds and kept watch, wolf vigilant but controlled. Leora felt the pull recalibrate again, less intense, more integrated, like a muscle finally learning its job. Still, the cost showed. She slept poorly, dreams crowded with fire and falling glass. Valor noticed and insisted on rest days, enforced by stubborn affection. She resisted, then relented. Healing, she learned, was also work. When letters arrived from Night Willow describing children playing without fear, she wept quietly. Grief and relief tangled. She wrote back simply, promising continued protection, through structure, not heroics. As summer edged closer, the camps thinned, people returning home with new expectations. The Covenant became a network rather than a place. Leora trained facilitators, not followers, refusing dependency. The symbol loosened, replaced by practice. One evening, as they walked the riverbank, Leora admitted a truth she had been avoiding. "The pull is changing me," she said, "not into something else, but into someone seen." Valor considered, then smiled gently. "You were always seen by the land," he said. "Now people are catching up." She laughed, a sound lighter than it had been in months. They spoke of future seasons, of teaching, of children who might inherit a world less cruel by inches. A messenger arrived at dusk with final news. Osmond Velcrest had resigned under pressure, replaced by a provisional council bound by oversight terms. It was not victory, but it was movement. Leora watched the river darken with night and felt a quiet satisfaction settle. Chains broken did not guarantee freedom. Maintenance did. She turned toward camp, toward work and warmth and love, ready to keep choosing clarity over fear. The storm had not ended, but she had learned how to stand in it without losing herself. The night the truth finally demanded blood, the sky over Ashmere burned copper red at the edges, clouds stacked like bruises that refused to fade. Leora felt the pull surge violently for the first time in weeks, no longer balanced or patient, but urgent. An alarm screamed through bone and breath. She woke Valor without words. He was already rising, wolf snapping awake inside him, sensing the same rupture. Shouts erupted outside as runners crashed through camp, voices breaking with panic. "Blackspire has fallen," one cried. "Not to revolt, to fire." Mercenaries, bought and abandoned, had turned on the keep, destroying records, freeing prisoners, erasing evidence before dawn. Leora's chest tightened. This was not chaos. This was cleanup. She pulled on boots with shaking hands, mind racing. If the proof burned, the Covenant's fragile legitimacy would fracture. Fear would rush back in. She stepped outside and took command with quiet authority, directing riders, dispatching messengers, ordering copies of records spread immediately. The pull aligned her decisions at brutal speed. Valor mounted beside her. They rode hard, wind tearing tears from Leora's eyes, the road narrowing into a single truth. If she failed now, everything they built would collapse into ash and rumor. They reached Blackspire's outskirts as flames chewed through the lower halls, smoke rolling thick and choking. Townsfolk stood frozen, watching history burn. Leora did not slow. She rode straight into the chaos, shouting names, organizing bucket lines, pulling people into motion. Valor dismounted and shifted halfway, strength and speed magnified, clearing fallen beams, dragging the injured free. The pull burned hot, almost painful, urging Leora toward the archive wing where stone might still hold. She ran, breath ragged, heat searing her lungs. Inside, fire roared like a living thing, hungry and loud. She wrapped cloth over her mouth and pressed forward, guided by instinct sharper than thought. She found what remained, charred ledgers, half-intact seals, and dragged them out, coughing, vision blurring. A beam collapsed behind her, cutting off escape. Panic surged. For one terrifying moment, she felt small again, chained by fear. Then Valor crashed through smoke and flame, hauling her clear as the ceiling gave way. Outside, rain began to fall, hissing against fire. The crowd erupted into motion. The keep would not be saved, but the truth might be. As dawn broke gray and raw, the scale of betrayal surfaced. The mercenaries were gone. Osmond's allies disavowed responsibility. Too quickly, too cleanly. Leora stood before the townsfolk, soot-streaked and shaking, and told them plainly what had happened. She did not soften it. Anger rose like a tide. Demands for vengeance cut the air. Leora raised her hands, voice hoarse but steady. "This is what they want," she said. "For us to burn each other instead of rebuilding." She laid out what survived. Copies, witnesses, treaties already ratified beyond reach of flame. The fire had destroyed stone, not structure. Slowly the fury shifted into resolve. People volunteered to rebuild, to guard records in multiple towns, to decentralize power so no single fire could erase it again. Leora felt the pull ease slightly, approval threading through exhaustion. Valor watched her with a mixture of pride and fear. This moment carved lines that would never fully fade. Later, alone behind a collapsed wall, Leora broke down, sobs tearing free now that the crisis had passed. Valor held her without speaking, letting grief have its say. The reckoning came by noon. Survivors of the secret court were dragged into daylight by townsfolk, unwilling to be silent again. Trials were held openly, messy and imperfect, but seen. Leora refused to preside. She testified. So did Perrin, Isolde, traitors, unbound, wolves. Verdicts landed unevenly, but they landed. Exile, restitution, dismantling of contracts, consequences written into daylight. When someone called for executions, Leora spoke once more, voice quiet but unyielding. "Killing is easy," she said. "Repair is harder. Choose harder." The crowd listened. Not all agreed, but enough did. By evening, the worst fires were out and the worst lies exposed. Blackspire Keep stood gutted, no longer a throne. As the sun dipped, Leora walked the perimeter, hands blackened, heart heavy. She felt older than she had the day before. Valor joined her, bandaged dark with blood where a falling stone had struck him. She scolded him through tears. He smiled, weary and alive. "Worth it," he said simply. She pressed her forehead to his, breathing him in, grounding herself in what remained solid. That night, under a sky scrubbed clean by rain, Lyra addressed the gathered towns. She did not promise peace. She promised process. Records would live in many hands. Authority would rotate. Silver would be tracked, audited, constrained. Wolves and humans would share oversight. The covenant would become law by practice, not decree. Applause rose, not thunderous, but sustained. Leora felt the pull settle into something deep and quiet. No longer urgent, no longer alarming, integrated. She realized then it had never been about power. It had been about alignment. She leaned into Valor's side as the crowd dispersed, exhaustion bone deep but clean. The hardest moment had passed. Tomorrow would be about healing, about building without spectacle. She looked once more at the ruins of Blackspire, flames reduced to embers, and felt no triumph, only resolve. Chains could be reforged in many shapes. She would keep breaking them, not alone, not loudly, but together in daylight until freedom learned how to last. The morning after Blackspire's fall arrived quietly, pale sunlight brushing ash and broken stone as if testing whether the world was ready to wake. Leora stood by the river with damp boots and aching bones, watching smoke thin into memory. The pull inside her was still, not gone, but settled. No longer a warning, no longer a guide, simply part of her breath. Valor joined her without words, their shoulders touching, both marked by soot and sleepless resolve. Around them, people moved with purpose. No one waited for orders. They sorted records, tended wounds, argued logistics, and laughed softly when exhaustion demanded it. That sight loosened something tight in Leora's chest. Change had taken root, not because she demanded it, but because people chose it. When a child asked if the fire meant monsters would return, Leora knelt and answered honestly. "Monsters come back when we forget each other," she said. "We won't." The child nodded, satisfied. Leora watched him run back to play and felt tears rise uninvited. The world had not ended in fire. It had cleared space. That mattered. For the first time since the silver chains burned her skin, Leora believed the future might hold up more than survival. By midday, the Provisional Council gathered in the open square. No walls, no raised dais, no shadows to hide ambition. Leora refused the central seat, choosing a place among traitors, wolves, elders, and unbound alike. Perrin Locke read the motions aloud. Isolde Fen recorded every word in ink meant to travel, not disappear. Authority rotated by design. When someone proposed Leora as permanent leader, she declined gently but firmly, offering a facilitation term bound by review and limits. The vote favored her proposal. Relief washed through her. She could serve without becoming what she fought. Decisions followed, distributed archives, shared patrols, transparent silver tracking, open courts observed by mixed councils. The process was slow, sometimes frustrating, but visible. When disagreements flared, they were named instead of buried. Valor watched from the edge, wolf calm, eyes proud and worried in equal measure. He knew what this cost her. Leadership carved deeper marks than silver ever had. When the council adjourned, applause rose, not thunderous, but sustained. Leora felt no triumph, only readiness, power, she understood now, was safest when it could be questioned aloud. That evening, as camps thinned and people returned home carrying copies of Truth, Leora finally allowed herself to rest. She and Valor walked beyond the river, where birch trees caught the sunset in pale gold. She admitted the fear she had carried silently, that the pull would one day demand more than she could give. Valor listened, then answered simply. "It never demanded," he said. "You chose." The distinction mattered. They spoke of ordinary futures, of teaching rather than leading, of walking paths without, watching for ambush, of laughter that did not taste like relief. Valor confessed his own fear of becoming only a weapon, useful in crisis and forgotten in peace. Leora touched his face, grounding him as he had grounded her. "You are more than teeth and fury," she said. "So am I." As stars kindled, wolves howled in the distance, not in warning, but in song. The sound braided with the river's hush, sealing something unspoken between them. Whatever they became next would be chosen, not forced. That promise felt stronger than any law written in stone. Days passed, repairs continued, trials concluded. Calvin Mear's exile was enforced by treaty, not threat, watched by many eyes. Osmond Valcrest faded into history, remembered not as a tyrant but as a lesson. Leora stepped back from daily governance, training facilitators, refusing dependency. The Covenant became a network rather than a place, flexible enough to survive fire and fracture. Children played without flinching at distant horns. Silver remained locked, audited, restrained by law and witness. One afternoon, Leora returned to Silvershard Pit alone. The runes lay cracked, dulled by time and rain. She touched the stone where she had knelt and felt no pull, no echo, only closure. She did not hate the place anymore. Hatred kept chains alive. She left a simple marker behind, not of victory, but of warning. Never again without consent. When she rejoined Valor at the forest's edge, he smiled, sensing the shift. The past no longer reached for her ankles. It stayed where it belonged. At dawn, Leora stood before the gathered people, one final time, not to command, but to release. "I won't lead you," she said. "I'll walk with you when needed." There were nods, some tears, no protests. The work would continue without her at the center, exactly as it should. She and Valor turned toward Night Willow Wilds, hand in hand, choosing a quieter path forward. The pull within her settled fully, not gone, but harmonized, no longer about breaking chains, but recognizing them before they closed. As they disappeared into trees, the world did not collapse. It breathed. Freedom, Leora understood at last, was not a single moment of rescue. It was maintenance. It was choosing each day not to recreate the cages you escaped. And as sunlight filtered through leaves ahead, Leora Ashenfell walked unchained, not because someone saved her, but because she helped teach the world how not to bind her again. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Like this video so more people can find it. Subscribe for powerful stories that hit deeper than entertainment. Share this with someone who's ever felt silenced, underestimated, or caged by circumstances. And comment below, what part of the story stayed with you the most? Your voice matters here, and the next story might begin with it.